Jay, why are we laughing so much? How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
No, I already did that with the
I
other
should
guy.
say that.
Him and Beowulf and.
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me.
Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
All right, Jay, we're back. It's Teacher Talk with Paul and Jay, and we are, yes, still in the Odyssey. Jay, you're not still in Beowulf, are you? It's almost the end of semester one.
Unfortunately, he's gone. What I want to say, because I'm very optimistic about the power of literature,
Yes.
next fall.
He'll be back.
We
Yeah.
read some contemporary poetry, and then we're on to our next favorite sort of Nordic dude, Hamlet.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I've heard that people have studied that, and they think that maybe Hamlet, you know, there's something there, that Hamlet takes place basically in the same place that Heorot Hall may have stood. It's kind of interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
the source is medieval Danish, and it's interesting to read up on, like, sorry, folks, we're supposed to be talking about the Odyssey, but this is kind of
Right, we'll get there. Yeah.
But the source is really interesting and wildly different than what Shakespeare gives us. So I know a lot of people criticize Shakespeare for, I think, only having one or two original plots, but he biographies them so much that they're really not recognizable. Like, he just uses them as raw material to build his own thing.
Yeah. It's exemplary.
Stuff. But it's interesting. Like, one kid said, why are all the movies in English accents? And I said, I know, it should be Old Norse. But that would kind of limit the audience, particularly if you were producing it in the early 1600s in London. So,
Yeah, so it's just practical. Well, we are. I'm glad to hear that. I was thinking before we got on tonight, I want to check in and make sure you had moved far enough that you weren't still in Beowulf at this time. On to the next book. Yeah, I'm not much deeper in than Beowulf. We finished Gawain and the Green Knight, and we're writing papers right now. As of today, they're about 500 words into an essay. All pretty rough draft, but we're moving along. Well, we're moving along here in the Odyssey too, slowly but surely. If you're joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here on the podcast with us. We're walking through the Odyssey. It's not the only book we've walked through, but we're doing this one now book by book. Our focus is on highlighting how to teach this book. As you go along, you get a sense of why you should teach it as well. Sometimes we address that directly, but we like to break down the chapters in how to do it. What's essential and obvious, what's subtle and crucial, and then what Jay and I have found over the years that are lingering questions or lingering awesome in the chapter that we'd like to highlight. Hopefully, this motivates you to take on this book of the Odyssey and teach it not in excerpts, but give the time over to it in whole. Because as Jay has said many times, everything is here. Pick something you want to talk about topically, and it's here. So it's fun, and it's fun to find it here and to help students discover it and discover that actually the Odyssey is good. Shocking. So that's what we're doing. We are on book 16.
Yeah.
So book 16 tonight, and we'll go down the path. But before we do, we like to start with a poem every time. And Jay, what do you have for us tonight?
So this is, I think, my favorite poem about fathers and sons. And the chapter in Fagles and the chapter in Emily Wilson is called Father and Son, and it's because it's finally the recognition scene between Odysseus and his long-lost son, or Telemachus and his long-lost father. So Richard Blanco is a Cuban-American poet. He's actually a civil engineer from Maine.
No kidding.
Who's also a poet, yeah.
Of course.
He got on my radar screen because when there was the Boston Marathon bombings, he was a New England poet. They called him into the Boston Garden, and he wrote a poem called Boston Strong, a long narrative poem, and it was really moving. And I got some of his books. He came to our school several years ago. Really great guy. I got to meet him. But yeah, interestingly, he talked a little bit to some students who are interested in creative writing about his engineering brain and how that actually helps him as a poet. And my seniors, the AP guys, read some George Saunders short stories. He's a creative writing professor at Syracuse. He wrote Lincoln in the Bardo, which won the Pulitzer a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he was an engineer also. And I find that intersection really interesting. I am decidedly, whatever the opposite of an engineer is what I am. So this is called My Father, My Hands. And it strikes me that the last time Odysseus saw Telemachus was a baby. So these memories of, you and I, I'm sure, remember like our dad and uncles and grandpa's hands, and the difference between what a man's hands or even an adult woman's hands look like versus like a little boy's hands. And like it kind of is it's thinking about, the father-son stuff, which is a landmine for cliches.
Sure.
And I always tell students when they're doing their college essays or even like a poem, zooming in is always a good strategy. The more specific and personal will mean that it's not cliche,
Yeah, right.
So this is My Father, My Hands. It's in Richard Blanco's collection, Looking for the Gulf Motel, which I recommend. He's Cuban-American, just a sidebar. He grew up watching things like the Brady Bunch and these iconic American shows.
Yeah.
So he was desperate to feel more American. So after a long time, he begged his mother to make like an authentic American Thanksgiving turkey with the fixings. And I forget the name of the poem, and I think it's in this collection. Paul, it's really funny. I'll try to find it and send it to you. She basically just Cubanizes, she just basically makes what the Pilgrims had, a Cuban meal. And it's just his perspective as a kid was like, you've ruined this. But then when you realize it's like, this is just what she does when she cooks. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's really funny. Like, it's a really, really clever poem.
I'll have to look for that. He's not on my radar at all. I have to look for that.
Yeah, I like him. So anyway, this is My Father, My Hands by Richard Blanco. My father gave me these hands, fingers inch wide and muscular like his, the same folds of skin like squinted eyes looking back at me whenever I wash my hands in the kitchen sink and remember him washing garden dirt off his or helping my mother dry the dishes every night. These are his fingernails, square, flat, 10 small mirrors I look into and see him signing my report card or mixing batter for our pancakes on Sunday mornings. His same whirls of hair near my wrists, magnetic lines that pull me back to him, tying my shoelaces, pointing at words as I learn to read, and years later, greasy hands teaching me to change the oil in my car, immaculate hands showing me how to tie my necktie. These are his knuckles, rising, falling like hills between my veins, his pulse at my wrist, under the watch he left for me ticking since his death, alive when I hold another man's hand and remember mine around his thumb through the carnival at Tamiami Park, how my father lifted me up on his shoulders, his hands wrapped around my ankles, keeping me steady above the world. Still. Yeah. And still behaves multiple ways there, which makes it such a clever last word. Just sitting there.
That's right. Still to this day.
Blanco, you can YouTube him. He's all over the place.
Yeah. I'll check him out. That's very nice. Father and son.
My father.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it ties in nicely what I want to focus on this in this chapter, in chapter 16, for my maybe subtle but crucial part, I think. No, actually, for my lingering question. And that's very thematically appropriate. Well, it's a nice poem. Thanks, Jay, for that.
Yeah.
I think that is something everyone can identify with, and the integration of your fathers into your life. I like the details that it brings out that are the details of a life lived with your father.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Well, that is the theme for tonight. The Robert Fitzgerald chapter of the Odyssey is called Father and Son as well. So I think we have three translators who are basically agreed on the appropriate chapter title for this, and that is what happens here. As you remember from the last episode, Odysseus is back in town. He's back in Ithaca. He's up in the mountains. He's out with the swineherd, Eumaeus, settling in, getting the lay of the land, figuring out what he's going to do. And in this chapter, Telemachus comes back. As you might remember from previous episodes, Telemachus has been gone. He was out in the world making a name for himself in those first 4 books of the Odyssey, the Telemachy, which almost read like a coming of age kind of story, almost like a YA lit book in a way. And I want to argue tonight, that this plot takes a radical divergence from most of those YA lit style books, and in a powerful way. But this chapter pushes back again for the first time, as it were, Odysseus and Telemachus. There's recognition, there's cognition in the meeting, and then there is, excitement, hope, something for the future also comes in this chapter. So let's dig in. We like to break this down to three different ways, 3 different sort of sections, and we like to start with the obvious and essential. So, Jay, I don't know, what do you want to lay down as the obvious and essential as we jump into Father and Son, Book 16?
Yeah, I mean, the poem, the chapter is actually a really cool drama, like by itself, right? So in terms of summary, just in a very 10,000 foot way, the job of the chapter is for Homer to show us what it's like when, and this is manipulated by Athena's encouragement and Eumaeus' kindness, but at the end of the day, Odysseus reveals who he is to his son, and the high drama. We've waited so long for this. And then about halfway through, the chapter flips and the suitors try to figure out, oh, wait, Telemachus is home. We were going to kill him. And Eumaeus returns back to his hut after a journey to the palace, I guess. And he tells Odysseus and Telemachus that the suitors, we're going to kill you, Telemachus, but they failed, obviously. And interestingly, the chapter ends with sort of characters sleeping, and I just finished the Iliad, and it seems like chapters end with either slaughter or sleeping, like there's no in between.
Sleep or the big sleep.
Yeah, right. So the moment that stood out to me, and I hope I'm not stealing a thunder, but I think we're probably going to talk about it, is the revelation. Is that okay if I share that?
No, that's good. Yeah, go there. That's good.
Okay. So I think I lean more in your direction in terms of trying to deal with these poems sort of internally, and I try not to bring too much outside stuff because all of us can get really bogged down. I mean, more ink has been spilled on the Odyssey than the Odyssey. The scholarship's a lot longer than the original text. I do think it's handy for them to know a handful of things that are really, I deem as important. So no matter the level of my guys, there's certain terms throughout the year. Earlier on in the year, Paul will do some short stories in a simple novel, and they'll learn, metaphor, simile, persona. These are just words to talk about literature. You need to know some words.
Sure. Okay.
So here in Aristotle's Poetics, he invents the word ananeresis. Mm-hmm. And the greatest example of ananeresis is Oedipus realizing he made a really bad marital choice, for lack of a better term. Do your research. Make a blood test. 23 would have changed Greek tragedy. Ananeresis is simply the word that Aristotle coins in the Poetics for a moment of recognition when a character moves from ignorance to knowledge. And the example that I show my students when they're not sure what that is the Luke, I am your father from Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
And that's just another example of the Star Wars, the original trilogy, being very epic, very classical epic, very Homeric. Right. Starts with episode 4, Paul, in medias res, like right away, right? So, in the Wilson, it's line 181.
Okay.
So Athena makes Oedipus look young and handsome, and she's like
makes Odysseus look young and handsome. Yeah.
Oh, Telemachus already young and handsome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Odysseus is more like us, or like me. I'll be nice to you. He's more like. So Telemachus looks at this person who he doesn't realize is his father, and stranger, you look so different than before. Your clothes, your skin. I think you must be some god who's descended from the sky. Be kind to us, and we'll sacrifice and give you golden treasures. Pity us. So Telemachus actually behaves with Xenia, with hospitality, like you might be a god. Like that's how you're supposed to treat strangers anyway. Telemachus is proving himself to be a much improved young guy than the whiny little kid from the first 4 chapters.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Odysseus says this. Long-suffering Odysseus replied, I'm no god.
Yeah.
Why would you think such things? I'm your father, the same man you mourn. It is because of me these brutal men are hurting you so badly. And then he kissed his son and cried, tears pouring down his cheeks. He had been holding back till then. The boy did not yet trust it really was his father and said, and this is the part I'd like to talk about. Telemachus says, no, you're not Odysseus, my father. Some god must have cast a spell to cause me further pain. No mortal man could manage such a thing by his own wits, becoming old and young again, unless some god appeared and did it all with ease. You certainly were old just now and wearing those dirty rags. Now you look like a god. Now, he continues, Odysseus reaffirms who he is. They eventually embrace and have other conversations. I'm fascinated. I think it's handy, particularly once you're inside a difficult book for a while. I may have mentioned this before, but I think it's handy with readers to have them make little predictions before reading. And I think the preemptive, the sort of pre-engagement question for book 16 will be, they're going to meet. Odysseus is going to say who he is. Predict how that conversation goes. Go. You've read over half of this book. And sometimes smart readers will say, this is not a family that trusts good news. So when you meet Odysseus in book 5 and not Circe, who is he with on Ogygia? I'm losing my mind.
Calypso, you're thinking.
Calypso says, you're free to go. You're all set.
Yeah. And he's like...
And his immediate response is, you're tricking me.
Right.
And Telemachus sounds just like him. Now, it begs the question to me, what's being said to us there? And one of the things I feel pretty deeply that Homer's telling us is that there's not just one kind of pain. There's the pain of war and the fact that long-term exposure to combat is probably not going to make you the most trusting person ever. That's fine. That makes sense. That's logical. There's research ink that's spilled on that. But what about just perpetual loss and heartbreak and missing your father and, you know, all the sort of family stuff going on? Your grandfather's kind of left the family and your grandmother's dead, we know, and like your mother probably doesn't have a lot of mental energy to be a mom because she's busy trying to keep the kingdom. Like, he's going through his own war is what this is saying to me. And I think when people wonder, how can normal people who aren't epic warriors read and connect to the Iliad and the Odyssey? I think Homer's aware that there's lots of different kinds of life experiences and they each have trials to them. I don't feel at all that he's prioritizing Odysseus's pain over Penelope's. I think they're just two different kinds of pain. I think Telemachus's pain is its own pain. Later on, well, he's an only child. So like, who is he talking to? He has a piece of property named Eurycleia that's nice to him. That's it. Yeah.
It's like an uncle, but what's his role? What's his role in his life? And the loss, which would get dramatized in very dramatic ways, later, it's spelled out better. If you don't catch it in the first few books where you have a prince just slumped in a corner doing nothing, just being run over, has no idea what to do, and is just dogged. That's sort of built out more. But it's complete loss for him. In this moment, I like that this is the obvious and essential, is this moment of recognition. And it's great. I like your preparatory question for students, which is, how do you think this is going to go, and why do you think so? And that can drive students back into the text, which is exactly what questions like those ought to do. Should drive them back, not to external sources. You don't need them, for questions like this, for understanding of the plot, for building out the characters. But it's a great question, and Jay, I don't know. What do you think? Why does Telemachus recognize Odysseus? I mean, he at first says, no, it can't be true. Odysseus says, no other Odysseus will ever come. I'm he. It's gone for 20 years. I'm back. And that's all it takes. And then Telemachus breaks down. He recognizes him. What makes that happen? He's faced some formidable opponents, but we'll see that. Well, I wonder if the recognition, I don't think we're given anything, it just happens. And so you're thrown back on something. That's what I was thinking about with the Richard Blanco poem of something you see like that Telemachus must see in Odysseus himself. He must see something that looks to him familiar, that he can find because he already knows it somehow in some way that he can't articulate. There's knowledge that he has, as we know. I mean, Socrates riffs on this. You can't find something you don't already know. You have to know it in some way. That's this whole theory of recognition, that knowledge is all just remembering stuff that you've forgotten because you're a soul that has all things. And there's something, it feels like there's some continuity with that thought and that idea here, that Telemachus must just know. He must see him, like see his hands, see his knuckles, see his veins, as Blanco was talking about. And he knows it's true. He knows it's true. And he's seen enough of the world.
What you're saying?
Yeah.
Because I've actually never thought of your question. It's a good one. Like, why does it take so little time? Just looking at the text, he doesn't give much of a autobiographical sketch. I was gone for 20 years. Yeah, anybody knows that.
Yeah,
but
right.
What he does drive home is that, look, the reason I changed appearance is that Athena can do whatever she wants. So there is this the gods have this ability. And if you're a pious Greek person, you know that. And Telemachus, in the last few chapters, has completely proven he's a pious Greek person. So Odysseus is smart enough to know the card he has to play with Telemachus is just the pious card. Whereas my wife, she's going to require a layered argument. She's going to need to see scars. She's going to need to know the architecture of the room I built. She's going to need IDs and social security numbers and blood types and a urine sample. She's going to need to know all of it.
This goes way deeper than religion. These two are married. These aren't just articles of faith, and shared confessions. There's more. Yeah, there's way more. Yeah.
So I think that's really good. What's your obvious point?
Well, it's good. I want to stick with that. I put down for my obvious and essential. I just said the plot. What's essential here is the father and son being thrown back together. So focus on that as you teach this chapter. Dig into it as much as you want. If it's enough for your class to say they're back together again, isn't that sort of clever plotting, that these two threads get wound around the world and they land in the same spot again? Maybe you can ask your class, does that seem plausible? Is that likely? It doesn't seem likely at all. But there it is. Do you believe it? That they're both there? Even questions at that level, which I think are more, more sort of entry level questions than the ones we've been going down. Still, those are very interesting. And then it may give you a chance to go back with your students and say, well, hang on, what is the plot? Where was Telemachus? How did he get there? Why is he back now? And you go back and Athena's sort of working in the background, and it helps you see how this just Odysseus, just Homer as the plot master, as we said in the last episode, he's weaving a really clever tale. And sometimes that's kind of fun to realize, like, it humanizes Homer. It makes him into a story writer. We've all heard of authors. We know of authors, and Homer's just this guy literally lost to history. But when you see things like this sort of cleverness in the background, you're like, okay, this guy's, wow, there's an intelligence there that I can connect with. So that that alone is a pleasure. But I think Jay, you hit it. The obvious and essential is that these two are back together. That Telemachus is a little bit of a different person for having traveled. You do get that from the very first of the chapter when he walks up to the swineherd's hut and he sees this old beggar sitting on the couch, and the old beggar gets up to give him the couch to move out of his way. Telemachus says, whoa, no, stranger, you stay right there, take that seat, you're welcome here. He's showing, he's being marked, Homer marks Telemachus as one of the good guys, by showing that he has this kind of courtesy, the right xenia, the right hospitality, just instinctively. And you can't help thinking, well, he just got back from being that guy. He was just out abroad. He's the one who needed a seat. He's the one who needed someone to look out for him. And he's made the right application, of that experience. So obvious and essential, come on, this is incredible to put, just plot wise, it's incredible to put these two characters back together. So I say stick with it. Let's hit the next point. Subtle but crucial. So this chapter is dominated by this obvious and essential plot point. Everyone names the chapter the same way, but there is some subtlety in this as well. I don't know. Did you weed out something that you like, Jay, that's really different?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of connect two things, but what I'm going to do is talk about the atmosphere that creates the drama of the point we just made.
Okay.
So why it's so profoundly emotionally moving that this man is reunited with his son. I mean, that's, we see often it's Veterans Day today, and we'll see all kinds of posts of like when a veteran surprises, their mom coming home, whatever. And those are always very heartwarming. Oh. This is like an ancient version of that in a way. So I want to look at the simile about 20, 30 lines into book 16, because I think it reminds us of a particular kind of strength Odysseus has, and I saw this in the Iliad too, that is different than any other character yet in literature, that a character's strength isn't simply like a martial strength. It's a willingness to stay so focused on the mission that you could almost have a superhuman ability to squelch your emotions in real time. So we know how emotional it would be to be separated from any of our children for any length of time under duress and then to see them again. Yes. We would not be able to not hug them on the spot.
Right.
So this is 20 years, and not only has it been separation, but all kinds of terrible things have happened because of his absence. Mm-hmm. So this is line 11-ish. Odysseus, in disguise as a beggar, is talking to Eumaeus, and Eumaeus is silent. The poet says, Odysseus hardly finished when his son, his own dear son, was there inside the gate. I don't know of many instances in Homer where he does that kind of repetition. I think that's weird.
Yeah.
Amazed, the swineherd jumped up, letting fall the cups in which he had been mixing wine. It spilled, and Eumaeus ran towards his master, who's Telemachus here.
Yes.
Kissed his face and shining eyes in both his hands and wept. And then I always have my students put ES next to epic similes, because that's when the music of the soundtrack gets loud for Homer.
Right.
Like, pay attention. So he's stopping the story and he's saying, what are Eumaeus's tears like? He said that just as a father, when he sees his own dear son, his only son, another repetition, that's weird, his dear precious boy, triple repetition, returned from foreign lands after 10 years of grieving for his loss, welcomes him. So the swineherd wrapped his arms around godlike Telemachus and kissed him as if he were returning from the dead.
Yeah.
That's one of the top 5 epic similes in all of Homer, I think.
Right.
Because the dramatic irony, it's obvious, right? The actual father is right there. Now, the amazing thing is, the reason I bring this up is I'm sure Odysseus is seeing my boy is treating the hired help well, which is good. Yeah. The hired help who I bought is also close to and takes care of my son. That's good. Yeah. So that has to be heartening. But what he's not doing is outing himself at all. He has enough self-possession to not embrace his son after 20 years. He's so focused on the mission, which is killing 108 guys, and getting his throne back, that even seeing his son again doesn't emotionally conquer him. Now later, this is only a few lines. Odysseus in disguise, on line 100, says, I wish I were the son of great Odysseus, or that I were the man himself. Again, dramatic irony, right? He is.
Right.
Home from wandering, we can still hope. Let someone chop my head off if I would not destroy then when I came inside the palace of Odysseus. And if I lost, since I'm only one against so many, and here's the big thing, I think, I would rather die in my own house than watch such crimes committed. Strangers dishonored. That's interesting. That's the first crime that he mentions.
Yeah.
That's a particular obedience to Zeus to prioritize hospitality as the very worst. The lack of hospitality is the worst crime. And then he says the next crime, slave girls dragged around, raped in my lovely home, and then guys are eating and drinking. So there's a sort of in order of priority chronology of crimes being committed. I think whenever there's a list in like Shakespeare, Homer, I always tell my students, pay attention to the list, how it's organized, what's there, what's left out. Because the word for slave is doulos, which is a word used for animals mostly. It means to like subdue or overpower. It's like if you have someone on a leash, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And other translations of this are Fagel. So Fitzgerald is the only other enlightened one, women slaves. Fagel's in 1946, the Penguin classic is Maid, which makes them sound like an Austen waiting room. Isn't that nice?
Right. In service. Yeah.
Fagel, serving women.
Yeah.
Really? You know what they're serving, Paul? We can't say it because this is a family show. And then Stanley Lombardo in 2000, I looked it up.
Okay.
He took a big risk and called them women. So I think it's interesting. He says that after disobeying the will of Zeus, not giving hospitality to Xenia, the worst thing is to take the slaves, my property, and to disrespect them and rape them. No other scholar mentions rape. But that's what it is, right? You have sex with a slave. She's a thing. And rape is when you treat someone like a thing. Yeah. So it's really fascinating.
Most fundamentally. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned this because you see his emotions creep out, but not as himself. He doesn't say, I'm Odysseus. He's creating a hypothetical so that he can emote. That's how smart he is. Yeah, that's how smart he is. Because
and it's reassuring, isn't it? Reassuring. If he doesn't emote, then I think he's some kind of sociopath. Some kind of psychopath. What is wrong with this guy? So he adopts this guise and emotes through the guise, which is a relief to me, honestly. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So I just find over and over again throughout the poem moments where most normal people would crumble or say too much, like. He doesn't tell his guys about Scylla and Charybdis. Okay, he lies. But what's the alternative? They all die? Or they all say, screw this, Odysseus, we're not doing. So he knows when to hide information, when to lie, when to dodge, for a long time I thought it was because he was a scumbag. I still think he is, but I think in a lot of ways, but I think it's a result of the life he's had. Like, of course, he's not safe yet. He's not safe. We're going to learn. I tell my students, this is the only chapter with math. There's 108 suitors.
Right. You can count them. That's right. They're all lined up. Telemachus lays them out.
Eumaeus takes care of farm animals, and his kid has been on one trip out of the hometown. This is not Patton's army we're talking
about. Right.
And he's smart enough to see 4 steps ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's saying what he needs to say emotionally in such a way as I think to alleviate those feelings while at the same time not endangering his mission. It's incredibly brilliant and incredible self-control.
It really is. And just plot-wise, it ties the two things together. The emotion of seeing his son again, not letting things, not saying too much, but tying in plot-wise the next thing in the plot, which is the thing that's also in his mind, setting the home in order. And Homer has him do both things at the same time, resolve that emotion and talk about what's coming up next, in the same sort of move. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, that's very good. Jay. And that's in the Fitzgerald, translation. It's lines 120 and following. And Fitzgerald has the women slaves dragged here and there, shame in the lovely rooms. That's a little, understated, I suppose. But
you can read what that is. I think he's translating in a time where you don't. It's 1961.
Yeah,
but it's what it is. Like he says what it is.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah, wine drunk up in rivers, sheer waste of pointless feasting, never at an end. Yeah. it's just wreck. It's just wreck and ruin. That's good. That's
What's your
good. So, what's that?
What's your subtle point?
Yeah, my subtle point is that's a pretty deep read. Mine's at a little closer to the surface, I think, and it really is on the plot level. I'm kind of struck by this, and I'm not that I've ever let this stop me before, but I'm going to talk about something I'm not really all that qualified to talk about. But that's just every day of the week for me in class. But I love this plot point. It picks up on the obvious and essential, which is that Odysseus and Telemachus are back together again. But do you know Odysseus and Telemachus are back together again for the resolution of the plot? And I think this is something that's unusual in the stories that we know of coming of age, of developing of the young character. I think it is way more normal in stories for the father to disappear, for the son to emerge, for the next generation to emerge, the old generation has to die. There's something that's, I don't know if it's ideological, if it's a way that we think about the movement of time and the movement of the next generation, that the old generation has to go away. Either they die, or they're literally or they're like a Homer Simpson sort of father character who is neither contributing nor putting any kind of obstacle in the way. And they have to be eliminated. I mean, I think the Star Wars epic that you brought up, Jay, it works like that. Luke Skywalker thinks his father is dead for all practical purposes. He has no father until he finds out that he does, and then he kills him. And his father is.
It's Harry Potter, it's Luke Skywalker, it's Frodo Baggins, it's every Disney character, it's pretty much every Shakespeare young character. I mean,
yeah, go down the list.
Yeah. The way to create wonderful conflict in a young person and challenges is to eliminate one or both parents.
Yes. I mean, I was going through and I just started Googling movies to try to get movie titles, and just about any adventure or revenge movie you can come up with that has parent figures in it, it's exactly that. The movie Gladiator. It's one or the other. It's not both father and son on both sides of the story. The Godfather. It's Vito Corleone is dead so that Michael can emerge. Hamlet, which we've covered. Batman.
Can I ask you a question on this?
What's that?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would you make the case that Prince Charles? Oh no, wait. Can you? There was one of the best Onion headlines ever.
Yeah.
I forget how old he exactly was when Queen Elizabeth died, but the Onion headline the next day was 73-year-old adult male finally gets job.
Yeah.
It's like a sad looking Prince Charles.
Right. Thanks, Mom. Yeah.
It's about time.
That's a great example. I wish I had thought of it. As long as she's not dead, he is just a little pathetic, I think. A little under, just hasn't fully emerged. They can't do it at the same time. They can't both be on the stage, at the same time. They've got to go. I mean, I found this fun little adventure show. I don't know how popular this is. It's a British show, Alex Rider. Have you ever heard of that? It's a couple seasons put out by some British, show, whatever, but it's a great little adventure story. The kid, when you meet him, he's 15, 16 or something, and his father dies under mysterious circumstances, and he comes to find out that he's a Secret Service agent. He never knew, and then in unraveling this, you find out that Alex Rider finds out too at the same time that he has some of these same kind of special skills and smarts and intuition that his father had that made him a great Secret Service agent until he was betrayed. But it's classically exactly that same thing. Alex Rider does not emerge on the stage with his own father. There can be surrogates. You can have Eumaeus, but you can't have Odysseus, on the stage. And I'm clever enough to observe that. I can theorize about why exactly, but I'm not sure, I know symbolically or mythologically exactly why that's true. But note this, and this is my subtle but crucial, is that in this plot, it's crucial because this is an amazing thing that's done. And there's a brilliant scene of it on almost the last page of the book, in which Homer doubles down on this thing. And not only do you have, and another spoiler here, Odysseus succeeds in the end, but you have 3 generations on stage fighting shoulder to shoulder, wrapping this thing up. And it's an amazing thing. So here's a subtle point. Notice this in your, and if you're teaching novels and book contemporary novels, this is something that's really unusual. And it may be something to explore, something your students may be interested in. How can Telemachus legitimately, and he does legitimately emerge as someone who's up to it, who's up to the fight, without his father being minimized? His father's going to be as strong as ever, if not greater. He's astounding in these final scenes. And Telemachus emerges too, and his father doesn't snuff him out. He doesn't, occlude him or eclipse him, really. But Telemachus grows, emerges alongside of him. So many questions. Why is that true? How can it be true? What does that show about our own time and our own thinking about what it means to grow up and to develop and to be who you were made to be or who you're called to be if you have to do it alone? In Homer's story, he's distinctly, Telemachus is not alone. He's on stage, with his dad. So it's something that has occurred to me, and I think it's amazing and worth, digging into, and it begins right here.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing on that, just from a teaching perspective. I think another quality of a really great book, whether it's a contemporary book that's great or a classic book that's great, is that there's lots of entry points, Yeah. And I think there's a lot of personal narrative writing that can be inspired by the Odyssey, and it's really what you're talking about. And one of the questions that could be just a conversation question is, if you're a young person trying to carve your own identity in the world, and you have very stable, say, really strong parents, can you be your own person? Like, what are the challenges of being your own person if your parents are incredibly, strong and whatever adjective you ascribe? What is it like for you trying to figure out yourself? And I think this book, in a way that's sort of peculiar, addresses that.
It's true. It's true, because if you're doing that and that is your circumstance, that's not the pop cultural story. You're at a cultural mythological disadvantage in a way. If you're looking for a storyline, to help you make sense of your own life, the storyline that's much, much, much more normal is for you to usurp your parents in one way or another, or to stand in for them, or to take over where they left off, or revenge them, or something like that. But not to grow alongside of them, under their care and in their light.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very good point. So it is that kind of thing to pick up on. It's another reason. It's sort of one of those soft answers to the question, why do you teach the Odyssey? What's there? It's one of those many, many points of entry, Jay, as you were saying, which are curious and inspiring.
Yeah.
When
and
you
I
notice
think I'm just thinking of my own kids, and I bet I'm guessing you feel the same way, because I know you love your kids. I think we love reading about heroes who overcome amazing things. And maybe what I'm thinking as a dad right now is I'd rather have my son and daughter just grow up to be adults rather than heroes. Because if they have to be heroic, they're going to have to deal with their own cyclopses, and I'd rather have them not.
Yeah.
I think regular life is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Minus the cyclopses and the Xerxes and the witches and you know what I mean? Like, I'm speaking.
Oh yeah. And that's a nice thing here too. I don't think there's we read this as a heroic story, but within the story, Odysseus is not, he's not counseling his son to be a hero. He's saying on what the gods and what fate has put in our lives, in front of us. Our fate just happens to be, the destruction of our entire house and the loss of your mother. But it just is what's in front of them, so he's not trying to sell this or pitch it or teach his son, some grand stance to take. Do what's in front of your face, is what he's going to encourage him to do.
Nice.
So it's a good deal. All right. Those are a couple, I think, really strong, subtle but crucial points to dig on. They're very different too, are subtle but crucial, that both Jay and I've presented here. And so that's a lot to chew on. Let's close this out with what lingers when you close. Which the idea of this is when you're done reading this chapter and you're done reading it many times. What are you still thinking about after the book is closed? What's that lingering sort of awesome point or lingering question that you have? Jay, what do you chew on from this chapter after you're done?
I have one quick one, and then one I'd like to talk about. I wasn't going to mention this first one, but what you were just talking about is curiously connected to it. So I'm going to cheat and give kind of two.
Sure.
The first time I've read this a lot, and I never paid attention to this until today, that relatively early on, around 100 lines in, we learn that Telemachus and his father Odysseus and his grandfather Laertes and his great-grandfather Arcesius were all only sons.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that's weird. Like, if you're a wealthy person in this world, you have a slew of kids.
Yeah.
So, and we've been in other kingdoms with, like, here's my army of sons. And weirdly, they're married to our daughters, but we don't ask questions. So it's like Game of Thrones before there was Game of Thrones. But,
right.
You know, I just found that a weird detail, and I can pretend to come up with things as to why that's interesting. I would be curious. I'd like to leave this for people listening to us. Like, why would that be mentioned? Like, it's Telemachus, I think, telling the story of the family. That's really weird. That's a weird thing. So my question is actually about Antinous, and this is, I just want to honor the sort of end of the chapter a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Where he's obviously upset that they didn't get Telemachus, but the attention shifts, and he goes, well, this is around line, I don't know, 357. He says, talking to the other guys, if you think it would be better if we let Telemachus live and keep his father's riches for himself, we should stop flocking here to waste the wealth inside his house. We should go each and court her from her home by sending gifts. One day the lady will marry, and the lucky man will be the one who sends the most gifts. And I think this is really interesting because in everything he says in the world of this poem, he's totally right that the way a wealthy man gets to get married usually is by creating material stability. Now, the weird thing, the anomaly of, as we were saying earlier, the anomaly of the Odysseus-Penelope relationship is that it wasn't transactional. It was based on what they called homophrosyne, a like-mindedness. They actually married like a modern couple gets married. They think similarly about some things, and they have a compatibility. And what's fascinating to me is sometimes sometimes you see it now, when a couple just loves each other authentically and gets each other and there's no drama attached, there are some people that literally can't imagine that.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think Antinous, being himself, just imagines like, okay, well, if Telemachus stays alive, we're going to play the societal rules and we're just going to give Penelope stuff, and whoever gives the most stuff is going to get her, because that's how this always works. Not realizing he's not really reading the Odyssey, and he hasn't read all the chapters, which...
No, sadly.
If Antinous had a copy, this would be a very different poem. But I just found that really interesting, and it speaks to the different perspectives on a very important question. How do we love?
Gosh.
And he answers it the way the majority does. It's not about love. It's about keeping a kingdom together, having stuff, having stability. And Odysseus, as I said, picked Penelope against common wisdom.
Yeah. It's a very good point. It means they're doing exactly the wrong thing if they want to win Penelope, right? Exactly wrong. She's that weirdo who's just not going to be turned, and you never see any sign of it. No slight hint that she's turned by, oh, can I see that thing you brought? Can you just turn it and let me see the other side? You know, is it gold on the back too? She's not interested.
How about, like, Antinous never realizes that all he had to do was put on a turtleneck, smoke a cigarette, and be an emo guy reading a book. That's all he needed. He could have just been drinking some ouzo and just having some baklava. And
a completely different approach.
Yeah. Just bring some Proust, bring some Proust to the table. But in all honesty, joking aside, yeah, you're right. What you just said is so true, that they're approaching it the way everybody in this poem normally would, and it's the exact wrong way. I mean, think about how a lot of these couples get together, and they either one becomes property of the other one, or it's simply like, our people have been at war, so we're going to get married, so maybe there won't be war, or you have lots of things, I'll marry you, and now they'll be my things. I mean, that's basically it, thousands of years. And here's this couple, they're almost like a precursor to Romeo and Juliet, but smarter. Like, no, we're paying attention to each other.
Yeah.
You know,
and so we want those quick and easy reads, of the change in, sources of the self or sources of, how we understand our own, sort of identities and souls. And a lot of that talk sort of works out. But man, this is a really good lingering question. When you see something that pops that is not, it's not supposed to have existed in the world, essentially, right? Like I was reliably informed in my master's degree program that this did not exist in the world, according to those philosophy teachers at Boston College. This did not exist in the world until approximately 1500, the Protestant Reformation, and whatever happened, precursor to the Enlightenment, blah blah blah. And then, well, here it is, just sitting on the table, in Odysseus's house. It is amazing, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's fantastic. It's not too early to notice that, and it will be rewarding to write that on the margin of your book as you roll through these final chapters, because that blows up. That blows up enormously and becomes one of the most satisfying parts of the plot. I mean, you're looking for the bloody parts, and they're there, but that's going to happen. What you don't know that's going to happen is this thing, Jay, that that you're pointing out. That's unbelievable. So,
there's human things. I mean, one of the key recognitions of a 24-chapter book happens in chapter 16, and Odysseus gets home halfway through. So clearly, there's going to be like messy, human, emotional, interesting things that are going to happen. Yeah. There's a lot of the Odyssey.
Yeah, there's a lot left. Right. Right. That's a great point. That's a very good point. I really hadn't thought about that. That one had not, made me think after the book was closed before, but it's well worth doing right here in this chapter. I'm back to, this is something I've brought up probably twice, so this can be quick, but in short, the question that I keep asking is, because I'm interested in the mechanism of Athena's involvement in the story. And I keep asking how. I ask the question Telemachus asks, how is Odysseus changed? Like, on the plausibility, it's the kind of thing you just let go and say, well, come on, it's just part of the story. Don't ruin it. Just accept it. It happened. He was an old man. He had raggedy clothes. And then Athena, wanded him. And now he looks young. And this is a thing he does. Or she does from time to time. But if you're taking the story as I think the story invites you to take it, not just as a magic story, but to think about it more and more, I can't stop asking, well, what actually happened there? And so I go back through the plot. Odysseus has just gotten rid of Eumaeus, which I think is a little bit crafty. Or Telemachus. Did Telemachus get rid of him? Send him down to tell his mom? Yeah, Telemachus did. So Telemachus sent him to go tell his mom that he's back. Eumaeus asked, should I stop by and tell your grandpa too? Telemachus says, no, don't do that. Just get there and get back, because it's dangerous. You'll be out too late. And someone else can tell, can tell grandpa later. And then while he's gone, Odysseus can do what Athena has just told him to do, which is stop dissembling, stop holding back. It's time for you to reveal yourself to your son and to be honest and upfront with him. Until Odysseus says that he will do a thing that he has almost never done, which is, I will tell you the truth. There's a line there in which he says, where Telemachus says, how'd you get here? Where are you from? And he goes, no lies, no stories. I'll tell you straight up. And he tells him, what happened. We all know that's a disclaimer that you need to get in writing from Odysseus, which I don't know if Telemachus knows that yet. But he receives that and gets the straight story, and somehow he looks different. So if we're taking it not as a magic story, is there some natural explanation for this? And there are changes. There are extremely different people appear completely differently to us based on how we think of them, how old we think they are, where we think they're from, who they're associated with, if they're family or strangers, total strangers you see, come to look very differently to you once you're around them a lot more and understand them, have interactions with them, good or bad. They're changed and altered. And so I'm kind of drawn into this. Was there something that happened, about Telemachus? And I think the best I can do is to tie into some of the things that we've already talked about, which is that there was something latent in Telemachus's recognition of his father, that as that began to settle in, he saw him completely differently. Instead of seeing him as a poor beggar, he began to realize, oh my gosh, this is my dad. And even if your dad is in rags and is a poor beggar, you've got way other lenses, many, many other lenses to see him with, even if you've literally never seen him as far as you know. you would see them completely differently. And so there is, in a way, an experiential way. I've never met Athena. I've never had any of these magical transformation moments from Athena that I know of. But I've definitely seen people in different contexts in which I did not recognize them at all, even though I really should have. But they weren't at school. They weren't in this workplace where I know them. They weren't in whatever. And you see them out on the street and you're like, whoa, who is that? Oh, wait a minute. That's Jay. I do a podcast with him. I had no idea. Look at that. There he is.
Skydiving. Who knew?
Oh, right. I know. What's he doing in that Aston Martin, living the life of James Bond? It's astounding, but it happens. And so I guess I'm intrigued by the way that the magic, the mythological elements, I guess would say, that are in the story, how they touch down in reality, how they are representations of reality, which I kind of think of the Greek gods as being. And so that for me is the lingering question. That's what I think about when I close a book. Literally, I think, all right, is there another way I can understand how this happened, how he transformed? And it's interesting. But again, from there, it's a jumping off place. It's a way to jump into Greek mythology, to jump into the gods, to try to understand exactly what Athena is. Is she an emanation of Odysseus's psyche? The chapter does say she only appears to certain people. And when she appeared, only Odysseus could see her because only certain people can. So there's little teasers in there. Very interesting story. Very interested in Homer, the author, too. So that's what I got. That takes me to the end of the lingering questions. Jay, there is more plot stuff there, a little bit, as you alluded to, not a ton, but a little bit that you can round off with as you read through this with your class, and then assign the next chapter. The plot moves on. Homer never forgets that he's telling a story. We got to keep this going and get to the end. So it does. So it does move. Okay.
That was a good conversation, though.
Hey, yeah. Thanks a lot for that, Jay. That was awesome. A great opening. Go along with the story poem, and some really strong points to think about. I think at just about every entry level point, first time readers, all the way through to maybe fifth or 10th time readers. There's something in this episode that you might find to land on with the class again. Well, thanks for listening with us. If you like this, engage. We get some good comments from time to time. It's great. We'd love to interact with you on that level. Also, like, subscribe, and we'll keep going. We'll keep going. All right, Jay. Thanks again.
All right. See you, Paul. Have a good night.